Recognizing the member for Saanich North and the Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been waiting an hour and 40 minutes to jump up and ask a question about cruise ships to the minister. But it's not the question you're thinking of. It's not a question you're thinking of. I did ask the Minister of not transportation, tourism, arts and culture, about an article that was written in February in Business in Vancouver about sewage, grey water, and scrubber wash water. And I recognize that this is definitely coming from cruise ships, but also from just large vessels, international vessels. And that the Canadian laws, and specifically the British Columbia coast, is more vulnerable than any other part of the coastline here in Western North America, because Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and California have much stricter laws than we do about dumping sewage, grey water, and scrubber wash water. And so this is the place that those vessels discharge. And I recognize it's a federal responsibility, but since there's been so much focus put on the conversations that are happening around the cruise ship industry between the provincial and federal governments, I thought that I would at least start this session that I and my colleague from Cowichan Valley have by putting it on your radar, on the minister's radar through the chair as well, because it is an issue that with some changes to Canadian regulations and advocacy on this provincial government, we could improve the outcomes for the Salish Sea that I know that we share, have some jurisdiction over, but as well a very big interest for our constituents. And just wanting to get the minister's commitment to raise this issue with the federal government.
Minister.
Thank you, and thank you to the member for raising it. It's an important issue, and it's not one perhaps that the Minister of Transportation would take the lead on. It would be the Minister of the Environment. They certainly have done so with air pollution that is related to cruise ship traffic. You know, there have been some very good programs with the federal government that Port Vancouver has worked with on clean shore power to reduce air pollution, and new standards around bunker fuel that reduce particulate matter. So the issue around marine pollution from sewage and grey water that the member raises is a good one, and I'll take his point that it's of interest to all British Columbians, but it's something that the member raises on behalf of his constituents to talk to other members of the government about what engagements there have been or could be around this issue. It does pain me to hear that the United States may have a higher standard than us in this regard. The member could be accurate there, but I'll have to go away and look into that and commit to him to have a conversation with some of my colleagues who are in a better position to have this discussion with Ottawa to see if there's opportunities to look at what the member has raised today.
Member.
Thank you. I recognize that there are variety of ministries here to raise this with, and that others are maybe better suited. I recognize that. Just thought I'd take advantage of the narrative that's been rolled out over the last little bit to say that we're in these conversations and there's some timeliness to it at the very least. So I appreciate the minister's receptivity. Going back to the member from Sea to Sky's questions around BC Ferries, if I may, just for a moment, and the discussion around the $308 million that's been put in place, and I think my colleague from Sea to Sky has done a good job of outlining, I think, some of the maybe the long-term, medium to long-term challenges that COVID might have on the three big transportation providers, TransLink, BC Transit, and BC Ferries. And as the member knows, my riding is BC Transit and BC Ferries are very important to the constituents living in Saanich North and the islands. One of the, and I think this is an area that wasn't canvassed, so maybe I'll just ask, and if it was, I was paying attention, but maybe not have all been there. With respect to the impact of COVID on the bottom line for BC Ferries, they have quite a robust capital plan. And I'm wondering about the impact, ship replacement, terminal upgrades. We're talking about a pretty substantial terminal upgrade at Swartz Bay, but as well the need for terminal upgrades on all the Southern Gulf Islands, well, most of the Southern Gulf Islands that I represent. And so I'm just, I think, worried about the potential impact of COVID on the capital budgets and the reserves within BC Ferries, and just recognizing that, and just wanting to get, I think, the minister's perspective on whether or not we would use the COVID contingency funds that are set aside in order to support BC Ferries in becoming whole, if in fact the impact of COVID-19 has had a damaging impact on the capital infrastructure plans that they have in place over the short, medium, and going into the long term.
Minister.
Thank you. Thank you to the member for the question. We have canvassed, and I presume he's able to watch or read a written record of some of the questions about the restart funding and how that was able to stabilize at exactly the right moment during COVID, the fiscal integrity of the BC Ferries, as well as maintain service levels while the ferry service was deemed essential and ridership was significantly hampered. That is something that has really improved the outlook for BC Ferries. I talked to the ferries critic earlier about really a sort of better period of time to look at revenue recovery, which of course the authority internally funds its capital plan, and it depends upon how healthy the revenue situation is, retained earnings, all those sorts of things. We're going to have a better idea after the summer and peak season where BC Ferries is at. But in December of 2020, they did have over $500 million of government support given to them at really the height or the midpoint of the pandemic, which I know that BC Ferry Services and the executive team at BC Ferries were very thankful for. They did publicly announce some deferrals in their capital plan. They've mentioned some shifts from new vessels to refurbishments. We'll have better information later this year about what that looks like, but he can probably avail himself of the things that BC Ferries has publicly made known about how COVID thus far has impacted their capital program. I think it might be a fair characterization to say that BC Ferries is hopeful and optimistic that some of the earlier announcements that they've made could be further amended, but that's the information I have at this point.
Member.
Thank you. And I recognize it's very difficult to be answering these questions now. I think in terms of what might be, and we have to see what is. However, I think the point of the question is more along the lines of just, I think, being able to articulate that my hope is that some of the money that's been set aside as a contingency for this government, that it be viewed as, that BC Ferries be viewed in the light that it's a necessary part of our transportation network, as the Minister knows, and that they were working towards upgrading their, in their capital plan. It's to ensure the sustainability of that system for the users. And so I would just voice my support, I should say, in the government making the investments in that system. And if the capital plans are delayed because BC Ferries had to use money that it had, or whatever the situation be, I'm voicing my support that we ensure that those capital plans continue as best as we possibly can. So I'll just leave it at that for now. To another, and the member from Sea to Sky was talking about the bus transportation on the Sea to Sky. I've got, I would say, a similar situation in the terms of the distance, but the connectivity from Greater Victoria out to the Swartz Bay Ferry Terminal, including the Victoria Airport Authority areas. And just wanting to, and I know the Minister and I have had some initial conversations since your appointment in this file about a rapid bus, the potential of a rapid bus, or at least the advocacy for rapid bus on the Saanich Peninsula. Just wondering if the Minister can highlight any plans that might be in terms of advancing that, and what his kind of the philosophy is around it, and what we might see going forward.
Minister.
Chair, and thank you to the member for the question. I think it's really a couple of parts. One is around Highway 17 physical improvements, and along the lines of the queue jumpers at Sayward. So we're just in the planning stage right now around Mount Newton. So any additional initiatives that would help facilitate the speed of which bus service is improved on Highway 17. There is an opportunity with that. We'll keep the member apprised of the planning exercise on that when it becomes available. In terms of rapid transit corridors that are identified by BC Transit and approved by the Transit Commission Board, Saanich Peninsula features very prominently in that, along with the West Shore and along with rapid bus that's connected to the University of Victoria. There is a new local area plan exercise that BC Transit is going to be leading with a spotlight on the Saanich Peninsula. The process is in very early stages right now. It is seen as a multi-month process, but it is in this fiscal plan, in this fiscal year, so we'll keep the member apprised of that as well. I would say that I'm encouraged to have received correspondence recently from the CRD's Transportation Committee that aligns perfectly with the types of strategic priorities that BC Transit has already identified. So I think in terms of having the regional district government and BC Transit both identifying what our priorities, including improved bus service for the Saanich Peninsula, serving the areas that the member identified among them. That is a good and recent occurrence, and I was pleased to receive that from the CRD.
Member.
I'm pleased that you received that from the CRD. That's great news, and I think that it's I certainly appreciate the distinction, because I think when I was originally having this conversation in years past, that there was a perspective that perhaps more lanes and et cetera, but really what happened at Sayward, that infrastructure upgrade at Sayward, is really, I think, in line with what's needed. I've lived my whole life on the Saanich Peninsula, and to at least get the buses out in front of traffic would be a really tremendous start. And I know that the business community, in support of this work and in support of investments that would be made on that corridor, the business community, a substantive portion of the industrial lands in the Capital Regional District are in Keating, and as well in the Sydney airport lands, Sydney Airport, North Saanich Business Park. And so there's about $1 billion worth of economic activity that's generated there every year, and people don't tend to live. There's a lot of commuting into that area, and I think that this would be a really, really positive investment for the business community, and as well, I think the business community would see that as an investment in their longevity in the area. So I really encourage that continuing at the CRD level and as well here at the provincial government. One of the areas that's been raised, one of the issues that's been raised with me by the former member for Saanich North and the Islands, and now my colleague, the CRD director, Gary Holman, is around the lack of recognition of the Southern Gulf Islands. Salt Spring Island is his responsibility, but the Southern Gulf Islands as a whole, as part of the Southern Vancouver Island transportation study, and the lack of planning outside of the Greater Victoria area and not including the Southern Gulf Islands. We have a situation where the Southern Gulf Islands are rural and they're classified as urban, and they're in this mix. Sometimes they're included, sometimes they're not. What we normally see in transportation estimates are MLAs getting up from every single region in the province talking about road maintenance, road surface. The maintenance budgets are never big enough. The resurfacing plans are never aggressive enough. We can never keep up. On the southern Gulf Islands, we've got a pretty substantive challenge that comes to road maintenance and road upgrades. And as the minister knows, we've talked about Fulford Ganges as being probably the most traveled. I'm just wondering if the minister can talk about just the plans in general. I know that there's going to be MLAs across the province that have road maintenance challenges. And perhaps the minister can talk a little bit about his philosophy in terms of whether or not asphalt is the solution, that perhaps there's other road surface applications that can be used that could extend the life of the road and also diminish the cost to the provincial government, and how that could be rolled out across the province to I think alleviate some of the challenges that we face from constituents who are reminding us that their roads are less than what they would expect them to be.
Minister.
Yeah, thank you. Member, just to the question, there's a couple of parts to the question. One was specifically about the general problem of road maintenance that are felt by MLAs from all parties, all regions around the province that I'm pleased to say you have kicked off in the discussion under these estimates. Look forward to more, but what I would go back to is some points I made at the beginning of the estimates that are very strong around the budget at hand. including on the capital side, $819 million for highway corridor rehabilitation. So that is all about resurfacing, in some cases bridge rehabilitation, thousands of bridges, replacement in some cases, and seismic upgrades. Also a very significant enhancement in side road improvements, which is important in communities around BC, and that can include everything from graveling to drainage, road base improvements, shoulder improvements, culvert replacement, and of course in some parts of the province we're moving to a much higher climate resilient standard to prevent weather patterns that have been significantly changed. As regarding Main Island, so there are some seal coating projects coming up on Main Island, which I think the member will be very pleased to hear about. He's probably already aware, knowing that he knows the contractor there. Fulford Ganges, of course, we heard very clearly that one of the most important things around that very traveled route is to have space for other road users, specifically cyclists and pedestrians. So that's part of our part of the improvements that we want to make on that road. And then the member asked some good questions about a good question about asphalt and whether there are other longer life or more environmentally friendly technologies. And we're in an interesting time right now. The road building industry is embracing alternatives. We're certainly working with new technologies like micro sealing and seal coating, and on significant number of kilometers now on road maintenance, hot in place recycling of asphalt, so you don't bring in new material, you reuse it, you extend its life. It's both cost effective and has a much lower impact on the environment because it doesn't require the new use of as much asphalt oil and hydrocarbons that are part of the ingredients of asphalt.
Member.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and as always, I would advance the Southern Gulf Islands is a fantastic place to pilot these new technologies, and there's kilometers of road very close to the capital region here in the capital for the minister to pilot those projects, and the people of the Southern Gulf Islands would be very pleased to welcome you to the island. Earlier the minister mentioned that there hasn't been a question on the Broadway subway. Is that correct? There hasn't been no questions yet, so let's ask one, and this will be my final question, then I'll turn it over to my colleague from the Cowichan Valley. And we know that there's 56,000 students and 15,000 faculty and staff that head out to UBC. It's the region, Lower Mainland's third largest employment center. Daytime population of the campus is about 75,000 people. And the current project is funded from VCC Clark Station to Broadway and Arbutus, and then it will be connected further from the 99B line from Arbutus to the University of British Columbia. Just wondering if the minister can provide an update on the funding opportunities that are looked at to complete the expansion all the way to UBC, if there's any thought of doing that, and what's the timeline for this project to be completed, and where does the project stand currently?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair, and to the member. A big question and a great question, because we have hit some significant project milestones with the Broadway to Arbutus line this year. Perfect timing in terms of creating jobs, skilled jobs under community benefits agreement. Lots of young workers will get the first opportunity to work on a major project like this. Indigenous youth, women, underrepresented people in the trades will benefit from this $2.8 billion project. And of course, it comes at a great time for creating jobs and activating supply chains and helping local contractors of all types. The number of jobs it will support, both directly and indirectly, is in the thousands, which is great. Tunnel boring will begin next year. Project will be complete by 2025. This is a long way of saying that the road to UBC from Clark Street goes through Arbutus. So that is indeed phase one, with 6 stations that provide considerable opportunities, working with the City of Vancouver to build things like affordable housing, add to the job corridor that goes down Broadway. Your question is a good one, and it comes exactly at the time that the TransLink Mayor's Council is sitting down to create a new 10-year transportation investment plan. We gave them an extra year under the severity of COVID to deliver that to the provincial government. Undoubtedly, the discussion will be about when and how to create a phase 2 of the Broadway line that would go out to UBC. You've heard advocacy from UBC. We've certainly held a number of meetings with the City of Vancouver, with the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. Minister Heyman would be very critically involved too, as the minister responsible for TransLink, on some of those discussions. Right now, in terms of what exists around the concept of that, there is a pre-business plan case that was done by TransLink that envisions some of the benefits, challenges, and very rough outlines of cost for what would be phase 2 of the Broadway subway out to UBC. But I will add too that it was very welcome news just a few months ago from the federal government and Minister McKenna that the Government of Canada was creating something that I think a lot of people had advocated for a long time, which is the Permanent Transit Fund. $15 billion, and that will come into effect in a few years' time, but in the meantime there is also money for projects like the one the member mentioned. He will know that I think what is the most exciting thing on the most immediate horizon, besides the project we just started on Broadway out to Arbutus, is we're hoping for some federal a federal partnership on the Surrey Langley SkyTrain, which would be a very significant project as well, and it would represent the first mass transit expansion south of the Fraser in 30 years. So I think it's fair to say that the TransLink Mayor Council continues to hold that as their highest priority, and we're working with important officials and mayors around the table at the TransLink Mayor's Council on exactly that right now.